Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar on our new book, System 1, Unlocking Profitable Growth. I'm Orlando Wood and I'm joined today by fellow author Tom Ewing.
Hello.
And we're going to be discussing today the first chapter of our book, all about decision making. So before I begin, I thought it was worth just mentioning a few sort of housekeeping points. First of all, the webinar today is a short webinar, about 20 minutes, but there will be time for some questions afterwards. So if you have any questions as we go, please do type them in the box at the side, and we will get to those at the end. Also worth saying that tomorrow we will be sending out a follow-up email with links to chapters 1 and 2, which have already been made available, and also a copy of the recording from today's session. So those were the points of order. So let's get going. And this is the front cover of our new book. So System 1, Unlocking Profitable Growth. It's by John Kieran, Tom, and me. And what we're doing with the book is, I suppose, summarizing the work that we've been doing over the last 16 or so years as Brain Juicer and now as System 1 in the behavioral sciences, and how we might apply those to marketing. And in particular, how we might design for System 1 thinking in our marketing, because System 1 thinking governs a lot of our everyday decisions. So the book is in 5 chapters. The first chapter is called Decision Making. We then have a chapter on innovation, then advertising, brand building, and shopper marketing. Finally is chapter 5. And we're having a webinar for each of these chapters, and today we're focusing very much on decision making. So here we go, chapter 1. And the theme of chapter 1 really is that we think much less than we think we think. And what we're trying to do in chapter 1 is, I suppose, set the context for the rest of the book, to lay the foundations, to explain System 1 and System 2, how they work, and why they're important. And I thought, what better way to start than perhaps, Tom, for you to just read to us the first opening page of the book, which is entitled From the Ice Age to the iPhone. Tom, over to you.
Our story starts 20,000 years ago at the iciest point of the Ice Age. Human beings have it tough. Plagued by parasites, harassed by predators, constantly foraging for food, with nothing to help them beyond basic tools and clothing. Life expectancy is low, disease is rife. As for the weather, let's just say they're crying out for some global warming. However, they have one seriously big thing going for them. Ice Age humans have a brain that's doubled in size over the previous 2 million years, an evolutionary spurt that's left them with a fantastic advantage. As well as the standard lizard brain, which governs primal drives and involuntary physical reactions, they have a mechanism for making judgments and choices. In short, they can think. This book is about how people think. Our typical Ice Age human has to survive in a brutal environment, making life or death decisions every day. Most of these decisions are taken very quickly. Some are habitual, securing the skins over a shelter against the winds. Some are learned, recognizing instantly whether tracks in the snow are from a deer or a wolf. Some are governed by emotional response, judging whether a stranger with furs to trade is trustworthy. But all these decisions involve complex choices that have been simplified into quick judgments that feel right.
Fantastic, Tom. So why did we start a book about 21st century marketing by harking back to the Ice Age?
Well, it's to do with human beings' cranial capacity, how big their brain is. There's no actual kind of, it's not a perfect correlation between brain size and intelligence, but the fact remains that the Ice Age, oddly enough, is as good as it ever got. Our brains have actually shrunk around 10% since the Ice Age ended. So I think the point that we're trying to make is that we haven't actually kind of got any better at making decisions since the Ice Age. We still make decisions in exactly the same way, using these fast, rapid decision-making processes, and very occasionally employing slower, more complex processes. These days, unlike Ice Age man, we have names for them, and we would call the fast decisions System 1 and the slow ones System 2. So this book really is about how marketing looks when we realize that practically all human choices are made through System 1. that they are, as the psychologist Gerd Gigerenzer puts it, fast and frugal.
So what does System 1 and System 2, what do they feel like?
Well, I think the best way to do that is to demonstrate it. So we have a little challenge, which Orlando is going to take. And this challenge is, Orlando is going to quickly say the colour each of these words on your screen is written in as you read each word. And you can, if you want, do it with him. So, Orlando, ready,
okay.
Go.
Okay, here we go. So, yellow, blue, red, yellow, black, green, red, blue, yellow, green.
Excellent. You're getting a bit faster. What was happening there, obviously, is that for the first three words, Orlando was simply reading out the colours, and it was very easy because the colours and the words matched. Yellow is in yellow. As soon as he got to black, written in yellow, and he was having to say the word yellow, his System 1 brain was saying black, trying to get him to read the word black, because reading is one of the things that, you know, once you've learned to read, it's there, it's in your System 1. And what instead was happening is that he was having to step back and to use System 2, to engage System 2, to resolve the cognitive dissonance that he was feeling. So doing that exercise, if you do it for yourself, that is how System 1 and System 2 feel. System 1 is easy, effortful, and feels absolutely fine. System 2 is complex, difficult, and actually feels quite unsatisfying and annoying. And I think that the interesting thing here is kind of, you know, how we came to know about these things, where they came from.
Yes. So I suppose the reason we know about System 1, System 2 is because great psychologists have been working on what's known as dual system processing for the last 20, 30 years. In fact, perhaps even a little longer than that. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky hit upon this idea, I suppose, of a heuristic, a mental shortcut, which enables us to make decisions quickly and easily, and which is essentially a feature of System 1. And there are, if we were to summarize Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, very dense book, very rich book, there are sort of three principal conclusions that we might draw from it, just to simplify it. The first is that System 1 and System 2, I suppose it's the way that they work together. System 1 simplifies decisions, it makes decisions easy, it allows judgments to be made quickly, and System 2 is a system of mode of thought that evaluates options more deliberately. And this evaluation is really little more than a rubber stamp in many cases. System 1 is what we default to. It's the first thing the first way that we try and process any given input. So that's the second point, really, that all choices involve System 1 simplifying decisions. That's the default that is prevalent across all judgments. And then if we can't resolve the situation, arrive at a judgment through System 1, then we will tend towards System 2. The third conclusion, really, I suppose, from Thinking Fast and Slow is that System 1 is far more influential and powerful. It's the dominant system because it's the default system. We can't turn System 1 off. It's on all the time. And System 2 is a lazy policeman just monitoring what's going on and waving often many of the System 1 judgments that we make through. So how, Tom, do you think we came to have this dual system brain in the first place?
I mean, the roots of it, as so often, seem to be kind of evolutionary. Gerd Gigerenzer, who is another psychologist who works a lot in behavioral science, he kind of sort of develops the dual system ideas and points out that actually it's not the case that System 2 makes better decisions. It's not the case that by using your System 2 or by training your System 2 you can always make better decisions. The point is to make decisions that are rapid, that are good enough, and that do not use valuable energy in contemplation. If our Ice Age human had spent, their time contemplating every single decision they'd have to make, they would have ended up in a saber-tooth's stomach before too long. They'd have been kind of paralyzed. And I think that this is the point that Gigerenzer makes, that in most situations, System 1 works extremely well. Humans use it for very sound reasons. It helps us conserve energy and react to situations quickly, efficiently. As we mentioned before, Gigerenzer talks about these decisions as being fast and frugal. And frugal in this case means efficient. It's something that doesn't expend energy, that doesn't kind of exhaust you, that doesn't put you under cognitive load. And that's System 1's job, is to make things easier.
I think it's fair to say that Gigerenzer would say, fast and frugal decision making isn't a substitute for real thinking. It kind of is real thinking, an evolutionary marvel, really, that's kept us all alive.
So that's why we use System 1. But how does it work?
Well, there are three features of System 2 that we pull out for the book in this first chapter. And the first of these three features is really our ability to learn through experience. So, Tom, perhaps you could just read out another excerpt of the book.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the first of the three features of System 1. One of the writers of this book once took a sailing trip with a round-the-world yachtsman. Being on the open sea in a small boat can be quite nerve-wracking. Every noise and creak of the boat sounded very ominous to a novice, but the experienced yachtsman barely noticed them, until suddenly he heard something not quite right, a sound that may have gone unnoticed by anyone else, which made him act quickly and decisively to steady the ship. System 1 learns from experience, the experience that lets the yachtsman tune out unimportant sounds, but tune into the important ones, is the same sort of experience that means farfighters know when a building might collapse, or chess masters recognize the weakness of a position immediately. And I think the important thing about this learning from experience, there are two important things really, but the first one is that it means that the contents of everyone's System 1, the instinctive choices that everyone makes, is different because it's so based on experience. It's based on the different life experiences we've had. If you've grown up in a particular place, you know it terribly well, whereas you go to a different place that you don't know at all, suddenly you're having to kind of think a bit more carefully, and your System 1 isn't working quite as well as a native of that place might do. And I think that that's one of the reasons that we have to do research, because one of the things we have to do as researchers is we have to find out what people's defaults are, what the kind of emotional and experiential prompts that System 1 is giving them is. But there's something else actually that experience provides.
Well, it's what enables fast decision making. So we learn very gradually over a long period of time through assimilation of the environment around us, and this long, slow learning enables fast, quick decision making. Malcolm Gladwell, has popularized the idea of, to become proficient in anything, all we need to do is apply 10,000 hours of practice to it, so that we fully absorb the activity into our System 1, so that we can call upon it in an instant. So I think that's the really important thing about experience is that you learn over a long period of time, gradually, in order for you to make quick decisions in the moment.
So, what's the next of the three features?
Well, the next one is the second of the three emperors, if you like, of System 1, the emperors of the shortcuts that we use to make decisions quickly. The second is emotion, and emotion simplifies and guides our decision making. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio tells a story about a man who suffered brain damage, and he suffered brain damage in a way that disabled the emotional centers in his brain. And so what this meant was that he found it very, very difficult to make the simplest of decisions. So if he was asked, which day will you come back for your next hospital appointment, Tuesday or Thursday, he was unable to make a decision between two equally good options. And that's what emotion does. It helps you, it gives you a lift in one direction or another to help you decide between options. And it works because over our lives, whenever we experience things, what we tend to do is our brains imprint in the flesh whether those experiences are good, bad, or indifferent. And that helps us to conjure up a feeling, one way or the other, in future related experiences, so that we know, which direction to jump in. So that's one of the important things about emotion, is that it simplifies and guides us, and it helps us to make decisions where it will be difficult and lengthy to reason our way through those decisions. It's called the affect heuristic by psychologists, and helps us to choose between options. As Daniel Kahneman himself puts it, the answer to a simple question, how do I feel about it, is an excellent proxy for the answer to a far more complex question, what do I think about it? So Tom, what's the third of the emperors, if you like?
Well, the third important heuristic is one based on pattern recognition. So appearing on your screens now is something which your System1 brain is kind of prompting you to recognize. It knows that it isn't really a face, but it's still, that's the pattern that your System1 brain is seeing in it. What this object actually is a pair of binoculars, the kind of things that you peer into at tourist attractions. But your brain is processing its familiarity with the face. And the reason that your brain does this, the reason that System1 can do this, is that we're pattern recognition machines. And System1 is constantly scanning the environment for regularities. The more quickly and easily you can do this, the better. In a choice of two options, the one that's quicker to process has a definite advantage. The ability to process information quickly is known as fluency. Psychologists call this mental shortcut the processing fluency heuristic. Now, the processing fluency heuristic is a really interesting one, partly because it's only just recently begun to be something that psychologists have got very interested in. People are fairly familiar with the effects of emotion and the impact of emotion on decision making. It's been known for quite a while. Probably, most of you have a fair grounding in how emotion works to guide decisions. But processing fluency is rather newer. In the book, we cite a lot of experiments and studies that scientists have done about fluency and the various kind of things that it can achieve. The way it works really is that when you recognize something, you feel it's a good choice. And the quicker that you can recognize, the quicker that you can kind of process, the more likely it is to seem a good choice. There's something else actually it can do. There's a very interesting experiment that illuminates that.
There was an experiment psychologists did looking at dollar bills. So you have a regular dollar bill that some people are asked to spend, and how many of these everyday stationary items like staples can you buy with this regular dollar bill? And then another set of people are given a slightly doctored dollar bill that looks slightly unfamiliar, or are given dollar coins instead, which are also less commonplace than the regular dollar bill, and are asked how many staples can you buy with this dollar bill or dollar coin. And what they found was that people who are given the familiar dollar bill that's very easy to process were saying that they could buy twice as many of the staples as the people who were given the slightly unfamiliar dollar bill or dollar coin that's more difficult to process. What happens is that items that are easy to process, that are easy to recognize, and quick to process, things like that we tend to like because they are easy. And we confer liking on these items and these objects, these brands. And so anything that is easy to process we like, and we're likely to confer value on as well. So we will pay more for things that we can process quickly and easily.
So we've talked a lot about System1. Those are the experience, emotion, pattern recognition, are the three big heuristics that guide System1. But we should also, of course, give System2 its due. System2 is very useful. It's something that kind of separates us from our nearest evolutionary relatives. And there are certain tasks that it can do that nothing else that we can deploy can do. One of the most important of which is abstract calculation. It's particularly good at kind of, unless you're a highly specialized mathematician, your System 1 can't get much beyond a few times tables that have been drilled into you. So for anything beyond that, you need to be using System 2. And the other thing, that one of the ways that System 2 can use this in everyday life is it can help people actually kind of calculate risk more accurately. Here's one of the little puzzles that we have in the book. This is in the North America. Which of these put you at most risk of dying if you kind of order them 1 to 4? And we can tell you that the answer, in fact, System 1 is probably directing you to sharks, or if you're thinking, oh, the USA, you might be thinking, guns, handguns, because you'll have seen the kind of headlines, and this is a very present thing. Actually, it's deer. Deer are responsible for a larger number of deaths, and swimming pools are second. So deer and swimming pools are the things to watch out for more. Our System 2 can kind of go through the risks and actually calculate this and work this stuff out. But our System 1 is still telling us that certain things are more dangerous than others, which is why you need to put up very large signs saying, take deer seriously, basically, when you're driving along roads. Watch out, there are deer about. The other thing that System 2 can do, apart from abstract calculation, is that it provides reasons for things. It post-rationalizes things. In the words of Rory Sutherland, System 1 is the Oval Office, System 2 is the press office. System 2's job is to explain what the decision System 1 makes, to come up with credible justifications, so that if somebody asks you, why did you do that, you don't just go, oh, it felt like it, even though that might actually be the truth. Now that I think brings us to what the really kind of core point about the whole book actually is for marketers. What would you rather be in communication with? Would you rather be communicating with the press office and getting the explanation, or would you rather be communicating with and influencing the Oval Office?
And that's what the rest of the book is about, and if you tune into the other webinars, you'll hear us talking about. It's how we can talk to the Oval Office when it comes to innovation, advertising, brand building, and shopper marketing. And you'll be able to download these various chapters from our website, system1group.com. 1 and 2 are already available. 3 will be made available next week. So chapter 1, that was chapter 1, and a number of people, reviewers, have been kind enough to give us some very nice quotes on what the various chapters are like. This is just one from someone who works in the industry. And chapter 2, which we'll be talking about next time, is all about innovation and how we get our innovation, our ideas, our new ideas accepted by people. And there's a principle that we'll be introducing called fluent innovation. So that is essentially the webinar for today, but I'm sure we have a question or two coming through the wires. There's one here, Tom. What about big decisions? Surely these are different from everyday impulse purchases.
Well, they're different in their consequences. Things like buying a house, getting married, buying a car. These are major financial transactions, and the consequences can be pretty life-changing. In terms of actually making the decisions, no, we don't think they are. The key thing about System 1 is you cannot turn it off. You can't say, right, I'm going to ignore System 1 for this decision, and I'm going to use System 2. You can certainly go through the process of using System 2 as a kind of box-ticking exercise, but the decision will have still been guided by System 1, and you will have to work quite hard to override it. So, for instance, when buying a house, one of the truisms in the house buying purchase is that the decision to buy a house takes place in the first 10 seconds or so from seeing it. The decision to make an offer, first impressions really matter. And of course, what then happens is that kind of checks on that and opportunities to use System 2 are legally built into the process. you have to, for instance, take into account the surveyor's report and get that commissioned and kind of go through the process of getting things accepted to check you can actually afford it and such like. So there's this kind of enforcement. But the reason that there are these legal enforcements is that people know that left to their own devices, people would just go, oh yes, you know, my System1 is telling me to do this, to buy my dream home. And I think it's the same for most other things.
And there's quite a nice example in the book that we give of Charles Darwin, and when he was deciding whether to marry his future wife or not, he made a list of reasons for and against.
More against.
And there were more against, but of course he ended up marrying his future wife. And this process that he went through and you know, was ultimately doomed to fail, and that he gave in to his System1 impulses. And so, you know, there are lots of examples, some others in the book as well, about, you know, how even judges, you know, deciding on the fate of prisoners are subject to some of these impulses as well. So I think that's it. It looks like there are no more questions, but thank you very much for tuning in. As I said, we will be sending out a follow-up email with links to chapters 1 and 2 and a copy of the recording tomorrow. And look out for chapter 3, which comes online next week. The idea is that we give everyone a couple of weeks to read each chapter, and then we'll talk about it in the webinar after that. So there is time to read up and hopefully enjoy the webinars that we're giving. So hope you enjoyed it, and speak next time. Look forward to the next one. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.